sure everything's good here. All right. I put the link in the chat. Anybody want to join me? Okay. All right. Let's jump in where I left off here. Jump right into it. I think it's this one here. All righty. All right. So we're inside these Engedi synagogue. And those you didn't see the other past videos that I did on this topic itself. This is talking about pagan symbolism, pagan images and stuff inside of these ancient Jewish synagogues, and why they're in there. Let's start. This is where I left off, I guess. So it says that leads us to the newest of the synagogue zodiac discoveries. The synagogue at Zippori in the Lower Galilee, discovered only in 1993. That's the year I graduated. This floor is the most elaborate of the 7 floors we know and contains items not to be found in any of the others. Unhappily, it is in a very bad state of preservation, and most scenes are only fragmentary. So once again, we have another zodiac inside of a synagogue. But this one uses the sun riding the chariot instead of Helios riding the chariot. See, it says right here, in the center of the zodiac wheel, Helios once again drives his 4 horses chariot, but rather than a figure of a man, the god is depicted as the sun itself. The zodiac is elegant indeed. Each constellation has its own name and the name of the corresponding calendar month written right in the panel. So, for example, we find Scorpio together with his Hebrew month, Shesvan, Sagittarius together with Keslev, and so forth, right? And that was interesting that how they talked about, like, what was the reason for this? Was it actually showing the zodiac? Did the artist actually know what he was talking about when he put all that stuff there? Because the zodiac signs are not in the order. The seasons, the angels that they have in the 4 corners are not in the order either. There are seasons to each of the 4 corners, but a new element has been added here. Greek inscriptions defining the seasons in addition to the Hebrew ones we have seen before. And as in Beth Alpha and En Gedi, the righteous ancestor theme has been well and truly represented. Again, we find Abraham binding Isaac. The scenes are very poorly preserved, but we have fragments of a ram caught in the thicket and at least part of the picture of 2 servants holding the ass. Those 2 servants, while Abraham and his son went off to Moriah, Helios rides the quadriga in the central circle. But extraordinary, there is no male figure in the picture, just the son driving the chariot. So you got the servants there holding the donkey in this one. The synagogue panel divided here into 3 sections and is quite well preserved. The 2 candelabra flank the Ark of the Covenant and the ram's horn. Palm, fraud, and citron, and incense shovel in place below. The Zippori synagogue floor, however, provides several other elements not found elsewhere. Scenes of the ornaments, instruments, and sacrifices of the temple, and additional scenes of the angels visiting Abraham and Sarah. Pity is all in such bad condition, and how fortunate we have been to have found Beth Alpha so perfectly preserved. Let's see here, y'all see the image here. Got your menorah. These are the big four sites we needed to visit. There are 3 others that are very fragmentary indeed. Some destroyed in both chains antiquity, others looted and destroyed in modern times. Some both. The little 3. Very little is left of the synagogue of Na'aran, now in the Palestine Authority area, some 5 kilometers west of Jericho, northwest of Jericho. Hardly surprising, the mosaic floor was discovered when the British Army was camped in Na'aran during the First World War, and a Turkish artillery shell fell on the spot, uncovering the mosaic. There was a zodiac wheel here once, and one only sees the lines dividing the panel, but the panel themselves has been defaced. One may find remains of the claws of Cancer, the crab, and at least one other sign. Aries is identifiable because the caption is preserved even through the picture is gone. Old Helios is gone too, but we find one wheel of his chariot. Older pictures of archaeologists show 2 wheels in the center circle. There were 4 seasons in the 4 corners, badly defaced. 2 Calabrian flanked art were seen by Pierre Vincent, excavator of the site, who sketched them at the time. They go to crab from Cancer. Oh, even less remains in Susia. This is a mysterious place, a large Jewish town high in the Judean hills, south of Hebron, on the way of Beersheba. It is a town without a name and without history. We use the Arabic name for this place for lack of an alternative, but it was a big place and it lasted a long time. Very odd. The synagogue building, large and well built, also lasted a long time. And that longevity was the undoing of a mosaic floor. Fashion changed, and when it was no longer acceptable to put pictures in synagogues, the floor was ripped out and a new carpet of geometric pattern itself changed and repaired over time. It was laid in its place. But there was a zodiac wheel here. A piece of the arc of the wheel is still in place. And we know the building was a synagogue because at least 2 elements we recognize from other places. I'll skip ahead a little bit here. How much I got here? Oh, that's all the notes and stuff. Okay. All right. That's all I'm almost done. I'll just read this last part here. A search for meaning. What have we found? We have found several places in Israel where Jews put zodiac wheels, Helios, 4 seasons, the panel of the synagogue, a panel of synagogue objects, and sometimes remembrance of righteous ancestors, and a mosaic on the floor in the synagogues. For the record, we have never found a zodiac in a Jewish context outside of Israel. And every zodiac found in Israel was in a synagogue. That fact tells us that we already knew that these zodiacs were certainly not just decorations or pretty pictures. Nor were there attempts at astrology, predicting the future, or astronomy. The art candelabrum shofar, etc., were put in the synagogue and on tombstones, lintels, doorposts, and catacombs. The most serious of places for the Jewish community. And the inscriptions on the zodiac themselves were invariably in Hebrew, even if the common language of the day, Aramaic or Greek, were added. That is, the zodiacs were important and meant something to the people who made them. The question is what? It is a time to suggest some conclusions. The evidence indicates that they were in presence of a mystical Hellenistic Byzantine Jewish tradition, a tradition that Talmudic Judaism either ignored or suppressed, a tradition we would not know anything about, for it left no literature. Were it not for a discovery of this artwork, these symbols, the mosaic, are in fact the literature of the movement. We need to learn how to read them. Historically, the mosaics are made at a time when what is sometimes called normative to Talmudic Judaism and Judaism of the rabbis, just as developing. It was going a different way. We might say that Talmudic Judaism was moving horizontally. A man walks a path with God giving him the law to give him what to do and what not to do. See? So that's interesting, right? So how to stay straight on the path and not stray off. God is pleased when man obeys and angry when he disobeys. This is the religion of the Hebrew Bible, and it is what normative Judaism became in the Talmud, the Middle Ages, and for the most part, up to our own time. But there was and still is a different kind of religion, much older than the Judaism we have described. We can call it vertical. Men always knew that their life depended on higher powers. First and most obvious, life depended on nature, on seed and growth, rain, sun, moon, land, wind, and fire. That was natural religion. It was what primitive man did. It was only a short step from there to make each of these elements into a god. Ancient man thus prayed to rain and sacrificed to earth, worshiped the moon and adored the sun. The cosmos was chaotic at first. The gods were busy having arguments and orgies with each other. In between the arguments, they could torture and abuse men and seduce women as they liked. But nature became orderly as the Greeks developed science, biology, astronomy, and physics, and tamed the cosmos. They defined the forces, influence other forces. Clouds influence rain influenced earth, and earth influenced men. Thus, the ladder of cosmic power was taking shape. On this issue, there was a bad news and a good news. The bad news is the regular cycle of nature was pretty grim, not to mention completely predestined. There was no good, no evil, no value, which is why the Jews never brought into it. The good news is that the cosmos was also consoling. Nature was no longer random or dependent on a whim of the gods. Indeed, the regulatory of the cycle growth and death and rebirth in nature give hope for immortality. When the Greek philosophy, following Plato, organized the form, the powers into the proper hierarchy from the highest form, the first cause, uncaused cause being God, then the spiritual ladder was firmly in place. And that, we suggest, is what they're doing by walking into the synagogue. We see the worshipers climbing the mystical ladder from the mundane and transistent things down here at the entrance, who made the floor, when and how much it costs to a union with God at his holy art up there at the far end. The first step was through our righteous ancestors. Their good deeds atone from our sins. Then, as we walk farther into the synagogue, we get to climb the ladder. And don't this kind of sound familiar, especially Negi? And climb the earth in the seasons. We are among friends. The seasons have friendly, sometimes smiling women faces. We all progress even higher through the stars and constellations. But the vertical path of Jewish mysticism is beyond luck, beyond the stars. It is beyond even the strongest and most fearful of all natural powers, the sun. Here is the sun, indeed in the center of the universe, and a chariot controlled by a charioteer, and a vision recalling Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot. The charioteer is God, in control of all four horses, over and above the stars and the constellations, that is, over fate and destiny. This is the God who ruled the moon and the seasons, the rain, and the land and the elements. Four elements like the four horses: earth, air, fire, and water. This is the God who graciously made a covenant and given Torah to his people Israel, whose sins are atoned for by the righteousness of their ancestors. And that understanding brought the worshiper to the holy symbol of the synagogue, which is God's house. That is why in all the synagogue mosaic panels depicting the symbol of God's house, the Ark of the Covenant is always in the center of its panel, and the panel is always located right at the foot of the ark itself. We have come through the stages of ascent. We are in front of the ark, the dwelling place of God's Torah. Yet the door is always closed. God inside, and it's still a mystery. But our long mystical journey to salvation is almost over. All right. Then for the last part here. All right. This should be interesting here for the Hoteps. It's for the Hoteps out there. Now I can get on out of here. How one should respond to those who say Jesus is a spinoff of the pagan deities. Before we look at some of these alleged parallels between Christianity and paganism and why they're false, it is important to note that similarity doesn't imply dependence. That is, even if Christianity did have beliefs and practices similar to those of earlier religions, it doesn't follow that there must be a causal connection between them, which I've always said. Similarities among religions shouldn't surprise us. Most religions, after all, try to answer the same fundamental question in life: where did we come from? Is there an afterlife? How should we live? Most religions have rituals, sacred stories, and moral codes. It would be surprising if there weren't some similarities among them. In fact, you might say that the similarities are signs that God does exist. You might expect different religions and different eras and cultures to reach many similar conclusions about what he about what he's like and how to relate to him. Claims that Christian beliefs about Jesus are not from pagan cults may be popular today, but there is nothing new. A school of 19th century German theologians sought to interpret Jesus against a pagan background rather than a Jewish one. Perhaps due to the anti-Semitic desire for Aryan Jesus, the movement continued into the early 20th century with writers as J.M. Robertson, William Benjamin Smith, Arthur Drews, and others who sought to deny the historicity of Christ by drawing upon the work of liberal theologians who tended to deny the value of the source for Jesus outside the New Testament. Unfortunately for these critics, their arguments were not taken seriously by mainstream critics, and the works fell into relative obscurity. It was not until a British professor, a German named J.A. Well discovered and translated this German scholarship in the 1970s with the myth argument rose to prominence again. However, it's still a fringe movement, and even Wells has abandoned it and admit that there is a historical basis for the stories about Jesus. So here it is. The people that spoke against it are now coming to the conclusion that there was a historical Christ, right? Among many ancient pagan deities of which Christ is said to be a copy, the Egyptian god Horus seems to get the most attention. Although much could be said about each of the alleged parallels between Jesus and Horus. Due to our limited space, we will examine three: Horus' virgin birth, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Horus was born a virgin mother. Several different and contradictory stories about Horus have developed gradually over the last 3,000 years, but the most common story of this conception, espoused by mythologists today, involved his father, Osiris, and mother Isis, to go like this. When Osiris was murdered and his body cut up into 14 pieces, his wife Isis journeyed throughout Egypt collecting them. She was able to find all pieces except his genitals, not making this up, which has been eaten by a catfish at the bottom of the Nile. Isis then makes a prosthetic phallus, gets impregnated by it, and along comes Horus. For the authoritative and thorough reference to ancient Egyptian myths, see the Oxford History of Ancient Egypt. Right? A virgin birth? Not exactly. Horus was crucified. How did Horus die? Well, again, that depends on which account you go by. Horus either did not die, died as a child after having been poisoned by a scorpion. His death is conflated with Osiris, recounted above. Meanwhile, the popular mythicist film Zeitgeist claims he was crucified. Now, crucifixion was a Roman invention. There was no Egyptian equivalent. So what is the justification for this belief? There are images of Horus standing with outstretched arms. That's it. As the film study explains, the issue at hand is not a man being thrown to the ground and nailed to a cross, as Jesus is depicted to have been, but the betrayal of gods and goddesses in cruciform, whereby the divine figure appears with his arms outstretched in a symbolic context. By this line of reasoning, we should also conclude that the Barney the dinosaur was also crucified, since there are many images of him standing with outstretched arms. Horus rose from the dead. The fact that the dying and revivification of Horus is vastly dissimilar to the death and resurrection of Christ. Indeed, the view that ancient pagan religion were filled with dying and rising gods, which the New Testament authors borrowed from in order to concoct the story of Christ, was put to rest by Jonathan Z. Smith in the late 1980s. And in his article, Dying, Rising Gods, in a scholarly and authoritative Encyclopedia of Religion, he writes, the category of dying and rising gods, once a major topic of scholarly investigation, must be understood to have been largely misnomer based on the imaginative reconstruction and exceedingly late and high ambiguous texts. All the deities that have been identified as belonging to the class of dying and rising deities can be subsumed under two larger classes of disappearing deities or dying deities. In the first case, the deities return but have not died. In the second case, the gods die but do not return. There is no unambiguous instance in the history of religions of a dying and rising deity. So you Hebrew Israelites, y'all better take this down. Y'all can beat up on the Hoteps. So Hoteps, I don't know what y'all going to say about any of this stuff, because you can't, right? When dialoguing with those who claim that Jesus is just a spinoff of the pagan god, you should keep three things in mind. Listen, y'all. Ask them where they are getting their information. That's number one right there. And I told JJ, for those of y'all don't know, I was in the chat and JJ 7000 channel the other day, right? And he said, oh shit, I forgot what I thought. I forgot what I thought. Never mind. Hold on a second. Okay, and I say this all the time. Listen, see, three things in mind. Ask them where they're getting the information. If they point you to a particular website or movie, ask them where the website or movie got the information. Oh, I know what I was talking about with JJ. I told JJ the easiest way to get Chris Harris to ask him where he get this information from. And ask him what scholars, Egyptian scholars out there today that subscribe to what he's so-called teaching out here. And if you force it now, if you're going to run the boat, if you got to force him to say some names, the names he's going to give you, just go look them up, and you will find that they have no credentials to speak on what he's talking about. We've done this before with Chris Harris. Like he mentioned, he had some book that was talking about Islam or something. I forgot what it was. And it wasn't Islam. It was the Bible, but there was a certain story, and the dude was trying to come off and something. And I researched the guy. The guy was a kook. Like, you know what I mean? He was like somebody that nobody took serious, and like he was like a mathematician. He had no education in what he was speaking. Take the parallels one at a time. It's easy for someone to rattle off a list of alleged parallels, making it appear that the evidence is overwhelming. But if you take the time to examine each supposed parallel, you'll find, as we found above, that there's no similar, they're not similar, they're not very similar at all. Study the alleged parallels from authoritative sources yourself. You could purchase the Oxford Dictionary, the Oxford History of Ancient Egypt, put out by Oxford University Press. Or for a shorter treatment, I suggest conducting an internet search for Refuting Zeitgeist, the movie, by Professor of Philosophy and Religion, Mark W. Foreman. Very simple. So with that, I'm going to end this thing here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And tomorrow I should be back with another topic. I might turn up in the morning, depending on how I'm feeling. And with that, I'm up out of here. Peace. Oh, I forgot my supporters list. Let that scroll for a second here. My bad, y'all. Once again, thank all my supporters and members. If you'd like to become a supporter and member, you can send me any donation at like Cash App or any of the YouTube portals and stuff. And I'm trying to get this thing back up here. I won't pop back up. What the hell going on here? What the hell is going on? Oh, there we go. So, yeah, why did it went away? The hell is going on? All right, there you go. Oh, that's not what I wanted. That's some other shit. Oh my God, this is driving me crazy. Now that won't go away. Jesus Christ. All right, there we go. All right, so if you'd like to leave a donation, you get added to the supporters list to get a shout out on every live stream that I do here and out, and also you'll receive a personalized thank you video for your donation. Once again, thanks everybody for hanging out and stuff. I'm Killer B, the Wishfinder General, and I'm out. See y'all tomorrow.